120 seconds. 110 seconds. 100 seconds. 90 seconds. 80 seconds. 70 seconds. 60 seconds. 50 seconds. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
All right, my friends, once again, it is indeed time to get our talk on. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J. Stan McCauley, along with the champions of talk. This morning's talk champion in Studio 1A, none other than the one and only Jonathan Small. Morning, Jonathan. How you doing?
Doing fine, Stan. It's a pleasure to be here again, as I mentioned every week.
Yeah, pull that mic up there, bro.
Oh, okay. I thought it was all. We had to get some adjustment before we even came on the air.
Yeah, you leaning back.
Already?
You got the lean back. Yeah, you way back. You're leaning way back.
Let me adjust to something. Okay, you got me just a little bit better?
Yeah.
Yeah, just leaning back.
Yeah, you're
too
good.
soon.
You know, Jonathan leans back.
Yeah. It's this chair, you know.
Yeah, with the chair, yeah.
The chair leans back, so it makes you kind of sometimes, without even thinking about it, that you're leaning. But, you know.
But you just pull it away from the mic, that's all. Yeah, you gotta lean back, bring the mic with you. How was your weekend?
Weekend was just restful, man. I mean, I'm sorry I was not able to attend your event that you had invited me.
It wasn't my event.
But I mean, you was participating in something that you
Yeah,
felt was important
Well, I mean, it was the annual West Indian Independence Celebration Parade.
Right, but you was kind of participating in it.
Well, I
wasn't
was in it. I was just one of the parade people. I mean, lots of people were in the parade. It was nice. It was a nice event.
It was. You know, I just had to rest, man. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
So, you know, you only gave me really 1 day. I mean, I shouldn't be saying it like this, but you.
Well, no. That's
I mean, 1 day I couldn't adjust myself so quickly in 1 day.
I know you're social secretary. You know, Jonathan got people. Jonathan, talking about people. I don't know if I can make it. No, the parade I had sent out. You know, it just rolled up on us. So I sent out a blast of different folk. You know, you want to be in a parade, march with us. You know, come on down, hang out. But it was a lot of fun.
Now, was you marching throughout the whole parade or just a certain segment?
No, the whole parade from beginning to end.
Yes, you have to be well rested for that. That's some walking now.
Well, you went from the clock tower to Bushnell Park.
Oh, that's all? Okay. But then still standing and getting yourself, you know, in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not the kind of person that like to show up and run. I hate to do that to somebody. Come for an hour and then break.
Hey, man, you know, as soon as the parade was over, folk hit the road. The parade started at, the lineup was 10. The parade stepped off at noon. And you get to the end of the parade, you go home. There's nowhere else to go unless you go into the park for the festivities.
Well, that's what I meant. Just go into the park at some point and then engage with people in the atmosphere. But it seemed like to me you were just participating in one.
Well, we participated. We had a blast. It was you know, it's fun walking in the parade. Now the next parade coming up is the Puerto Rican Day Parade.
And that's a big one too.
That's another big parade. Two big parades. Yes. Well, 3 big parades. You got the St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, that's kind of big too.
That's big.
Sometimes the weather's a little tricky for that one though.
Yeah.
It may be not the best. That's in March.
Yeah.
So that parade is actually already passed for the year.
Yeah. So Puerto Rican Day Parade will be coming up real soon. That'll be lots of fun. We are always in that. The nicest thing about this year's West Indian Day Parade, I didn't have to cover it.
Yeah, because you do usually cover the parade.
I usually cover the parade. Right. You're out there early in the morning, setting up cameras, preparing for rain. Oh, it's a nightmare. But that's the work.
Right. You're a real community-orientated person. You know, you love to engage in things. I know you're running for election too, but you love to engage in things positive for the community. Anything positive for the community, I'm there. And I respect that. You know, I mean, you don't have to. You have enough media to cover the negative, the criminal, and still you provide the positives. Yeah. I don't like covering negativity. You know, there's so much great things going on in the community, but that doesn't lead the news generally. So no one covers it. So I like to do that. Right. You know, and give it a good thing. How do we get the African American Day Parade back? Yeah, that didn't even last that long when they had started that. I think the restart didn't last long. The parade started a long time. That was a question from Brother Lovejoy. Oh, okay. He's watching? He's watching. Oh, okay. Give props to Brother Lovejoy. Morning, Brother Lovejoy. Okay. Yeah, I thought that parade started it back in the 90s and it ended. I didn't even realize that parade still participated. It don't seem like you hear much about it. It doesn't happen anymore. Oh, that's what I mean. Parades have a life cycle, you know. And the life cycle is geared up with the youth and the parents. And what happens is parades age out like sports clubs and churches. Well, this one has the Caribbean Parade, the West Indian Parade, whatever you want to call it. It had some adjustments. It had some adjustments, and so did the Puerto Rican Day Parade. So now we need, I guess, some adjustments on the African American Day. And then one day, maybe the whole city just have one general parade too. You know, like New York have Macy's. The Super Parade. Yeah, whatever that you want to call it. Somebody was asking me the other day, do New York still have Macy's parade? And I said, yeah, I believe they still. They haven't had it probably with the COVID a couple years ago. But that's a big parade on television, all the floats and everything. So maybe Hartford can just have one day parade, in general. Well,
Yeah.
So I guess it's already talking early.
Well, why don't we go to our guests?
Right.
Let's jump into the guests. It is It is Special Guest Monday. Every Monday we have a special guest from somewhere around the world, around the country, from time to time, locally. But they're always world-class guests.
Right.
And so Jonathan scours the planet looking for great guests, and this morning is no different. So let's jump right into this.
Well, actually, this morning on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show, we have a returning guest, not only to Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show, but also returning guest to AccessTV.org network. He was on All About You, and then Stan and I had the privilege of going to his boxing home museum, and he's a huge boxing fan, and he specializes in a lot of historical events towards professional boxing. So again, the pleasure of having, I believe, a retired consultant. Also, I classify as a boxing expert, no other than Rick Kaletsky. Good morning, Rick. How are you doing?
I'm fine, and thank you. I still work. I don't work a lot, but I still do work as a safety consultant. But the reason I was raising my hand is, and I'll make this quick before our main subject, I'll tell you what was a cool parade when the Mets won, and I was at the World Series. That's a story in itself. I watched the 1969 final game at Shea Stadium, and I saw the end of the game from the press box. If you want, you can ask me about that later. But then, maybe a couple days later, I did go to the parade, and although they usually called it a ticker tape parade, what they did is they threw computer cards. A lot of people won't know what that is. Cards that were about like the size of, like this size of an envelope, but they were stiff. And they threw them from high buildings, and they would waft down like this. And in New York, seeing all this stuff coming down, and the Mets guys coming through the cars, now that was a cool parade. Wasn't it?
Well, Rick, definitely you've been to a lot of different places. You participate and have a lot of knowledge in a lot of different areas. Could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background briefly before we get into our main topic of discussion?
Always lived in the New Haven area, and if you include Bethany, my wife and I, since we got married, we've been here in Bethany since 1977. I worked for federal OSHA for 20 years, been a safety consultant for 30. Besides my Ali book, I've got a big book out on OSHA. Just a quickie, the best part of our lives now is we have a grandson who's about 17 months old. And by the way, and I'll even tie this into our subject, he walks, but he certainly falls down. Thinking about our subject, for real, what do you think I do when he does fall down?
You want to take that one, Stan?
He cheers him on. Get up.
When he falls down, I always do the Cosell. Down goes Fraser. Down goes.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't get up right away, I pause as if I'm the ref and I'm looking at the timekeeper who starts the count. And then I look over at Lionel. His nickname is Leo. Again, he's only about 17 months old. When he's still down, I'll look over him, theoretically pick up the count, and I'll do 3, 4, 5, 6. And if he doesn't, get up by 10, I'll do it's all over. If he gets up, I'll say to him, not that he knows what the heck I'm talking about, do you want to continue? Do you want to continue? Walk this way, walk back. So I bring boxing into that.
Right.
Thank you.
A little humor too, Rick. Rick, your expertise and your starting point in boxing, I believe, goes back into the 50s. Could you kind of elaborate?
Yeah, mid to late 50s, then early 60s. I watched the black and white fights on TV Wednesday, Friday, Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. I watched with my dad. It was a lot of fun. My dad passed away a long time ago in 1970, but I did a lot of watching of boxing, and my father had been to a fair amount of fights, and that's what really got me into it. That was my start.
Well, Rick, on a historical level, the professional heavyweight boxing division seems to be sort of like the gold standard. It seems historically to draw the most attention. it's looked upon as the highest. Not so much as one belt is higher than another belt from another weight division, but on a historical level, when you go as far back as Jack Johnson to Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes, the heavyweight division seems to stand out. Can you kind of elaborate why the heavyweight division is looked upon as somewhat as the gold standard in professional unboxing?
Well, maybe because people just look at the big strong guy, but certainly some of the best boxers in the world, starting with now, are not heavyweights.
Mm.
People talk about pound for pound. For instance, this guy, I'm not sure how to pronounce his first name, Naoi, something like that, Inoue, who's in one of the lower weights, Japanese fellow. He just had a great fight. He is one he's a great fighter. And then you have Crawford at the welterweight. Crawford, who just beat Spence. Crawford is an absolutely great fighter, and they're nowhere near heavyweight size. Crawford, what he does very often is he loses or almost loses the first couple rounds, but he's computing, he's measuring, he's taking things into his head. He has a great boxing IQ, as goes the cliche. He was just fantastic in that fight. Those are probably the two best guys now. Then there's Usyk, who is one of the heavyweight champions, although he might be a little smaller than the other guys. As far as Fury goes, as annoying as he may be as an individual, and he doesn't look like a fighter, I wouldn't want to be standing in front of him, but then again, I wouldn't want to be standing in front of either one of you either. So he's a lot better than his, let's say, than his mouth or certain other things he does. It is fun to go back and think of the heavyweights. And for people who are just into boxing history a little bit, when they go back, they usually start talking about heavyweights and then Sugar Ray Robinson, but they don't know a lot of the other people.
Well, Rick, when it's been classified, and I give you my top five, and then I would like to hear your top five best professional heavyweight boxers of all time. Jack Johnson, Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali. Larry Holmes might be debatable, but would you put those as the top five greatest boxing heavyweight fighters of all time?
Close. And it's so, I apologize for saying something that may be obvious, but it's so difficult to compare. But I do want to start with this. When looking at who were great fighters, if you just look at somebody's record and you say, well, this guy lost 6 fights or 12 fights, and he's dismissed, that is not the right way to do it. People used to have one hell of a lot of fights. They'd fight hurt going in. There would be hometown decisions, as it would be called then. And sometimes there were even what were called newspaper decisions. No official decision, but the newspaper decided who won. Short notice fights, a little more chicanery. The thing is, did people learn? Did they get better? So I would not look at a list and say we're just looking for an O. There aren't too many O's anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Marciano was 49-0, 43 knockouts. Don't even just look at a 1 or a 2. When you look at Ali, because you know that's my guy, you know, so to speak, 2.5 years, I'm sorry, 3.5 years, I had to think about that. 3.5 years not fighting. So it's really difficult. Somewhere in the middle of that would have been his prime with the early speed and then the later power. It would have come in there. So for these reasons, it's very difficult. Somewhere in the top 5, I certainly have Ali. If pushed, I'd go number 1. I'd go number 2 with Joe Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Other top guys, you mentioned Holmes. You know, that Holmes jab, I mean, Holmes was one hell of a fighter. It's just a fantastic fighter. So I'd have him in there. I just want to, you know, I jotted something down here. Let me just look to my side to see where I had this here. Probably get Dempsey in that top 5, but I would also get Foreman in there. Foreman was a different fighter when he came back after 10 years, but, you know, he still works up in that. Was Jack Johnson a hell of a fighter? No question about it. I already gave you my 5,
right?
Probably. Now I'm moving to Johnson. Marciano, great. Yeah, but understand something, please. He often fought at like 186 pounds. 186 pounds. So I don't know if he could have handled a lot of these guys who are 240, 250, which is not to say automatically if you're a big guy that you're going to win. Lots of big guys have been beaten down. But boy, that's a tough one. I think that Tyson is very underrated. People think of the end of his career. They have short memories. And Tyson was not just someone who could hit. His defense was pretty damn good. So those are some guys that are near top of the list. I want to throw in another name that is not usually considered top 10 heavyweights, but the real pros, I don't mean me, I mean the real super historians usually have him in the top 10 fighters who ever lived, pound for pound, because you may not be number one in any particular weight class. You may have fought in a few and very well in many of them, and fought well over your weight in a class and still did quite good. The name is Sam Langford, Langford. He was only 5'7" and change. He was a damn good heavyweight, but he was better at lower weights. At some point, I believe Jack Johnson beat him when Sam was young, and from everything I've read, it should be reliable information, Johnson didn't want to fight him again. And also apparently reliable, this will tell you something, is Jack Dempsey did not want a piece of Sam Langford. So that gives you some interesting twists. Just one thing about Ali, which to some extent fits Sugar Ray Leonard, and I won't get carried away on Ali. Pardon me, we've talked about him before. Some people just seem to have a memory about a guy who had a big mouth, good-looking guy, dancing around, flicking out a jab. They forgot how tough he was. He is one of the toughest heavyweights who ever lived. Now, Sugar Ray Leonard, people used to look at some point as a dancer. Well, you ask some of the people that he hit in the mouth, some of the people that had a hard time getting up or staying conscious, then you find out that those two guys had a lot more than just being, let's say, stylistic, a hell of a lot more.
Well, you open up a door that I want to go into in so many different areas. You left off, and I think it's legitimately or good reason, Sonny Liston sort of reminds people to some degree, or reminds me of Mike Tyson, dominating for a certain period of time, and then all of a sudden his career and his life just goes into shambles. And one thing it has been some controversy, Rick, that the phantom punch that Ali hit him with, now I'm not going to sit here and say the fight was fixed or Ali took a dive, but if you look at documents of that fight, that second fight, and I got to be honest, I think I sent you the videotape. It didn't seem like Ali hit him that hard when he went down.
I'll address the issue completely.
Okay.
First of all, and at any time if I interrupt, I apologize. I just have something like, ready, so to speak. I did have Sonny Liston, let's say, on the cusp of that list. If you watch his early fights against, well, for instance, Cleveland Williams, when Cleveland Williams hadn't been shot, literally he got shot. I mean, bullet shot years later. Watch that fight and some of his early fights, and he just absolutely destroyed people. There's no question about that. Now we'll cut to Ali Liston. In their first fight, Ali beat him up. Maybe Liston just, he was too confident. Ali beat him up. Liston was all cut up. Apparently really did throw out his shoulder regardless of the exact diagnosis. I mean, that's a fact. Anybody who knows boxing even pretty good knows that's what happened. The second fight, they were all scheduled to fight. As a matter of fact, at some point it was apparently going to be in the Boston area. It got moved to a high school hockey rink or something like that in a little town in Maine. But Liston had put himself in real good shape. Then Ali got a hernia and the fight was postponed. Why is that relevant to our conversation? Because now Liston, man, he had worked his brains out. Oh, God, do I got to do this again? Do I got to take a breath and then go back to all that training? So when he came into that fight, he wasn't what he should have been. The punch the way it was thrown, if you just slow it down, some people say there was no punch. Well, of course there was. And now at all the angles you have on TV, it would have been seen. You had a nice twist to it. Liston was coming in, so it was like maxed out. And when he got hit, I think you'll see his leg go up a little bit, something like when Foreman hit Frazier. The punch was a great punch. And I want to give you the name of somebody who confirmed that to me. There's no question it was a great punch. I understand it didn't look like boom, but it was just boom. It was like that. And Liston went down. Now, could he have gotten up? And I'll get back to the punch. You know, to me, I have to say, I don't have all this in my Ali book. I would have done my book a little different later. I would have changed that part maybe. You know, the way Liston rolls around, boy, it looks to me like he certainly could have gotten up. But wait a second. There was a question of, might Ali be shot in that fight by the mob or the Muslims that were on the other side of the Muslims or this or that? Or was there a betting thing? It could have bullet missed and hit Liston. Of course, Liston had mob connections, which is not to say he threw the fight. There were all kinds of crazy stories about was somebody in Liston's family being held in a kidnapping. But also you got Liston on the ground, and Ali wasn't moving away too easily. The referee, the former heavyweight champion, Jersey Joe Walcott, whose real name was Arnold Raymond Cream, I believe, he didn't act properly. Now, if Liston gets up, you got Ali right there. There was a lot to it. Ali wasn't going to lose that fight. Now, here's just a fun thing. Go back about a year, and I had finally made contact with Larry Merchant. I think you guys know who that is. I told him about my book, that he was in the book, that I wanted to tell him a story about when we had met once, but you know he wouldn't remember the story, but I reminded him. It's a cute story. If you want, I'll tell you later. And I said I wanted to get the book to him. So I got my book to him. The most recent version that has a full epilogue was November of 21. So I got him the book, and this is going to come back to this Liston thing. And we talked a couple times. We did some emails. Very fine gentleman. He's in his 90s. Now, I'm showing two guys my museum. I'm repeating myself here. Maybe a year ago, my mini museum, which is much, much better than when you guys were here. No comparison. We're looking at the famous picture of Ali like this, Liston on the ground. And then you see some guys between the, I guess it's between Ali's legs, some people sitting there in that small arena. And we're talking about the punch. And I had just gone over pretty much what I just said to you guys with the two gentlemen I'm giving the tour to. The phone rings. Not a cell, it's a landline, but I have it clipped. And I said, excuse me, guys, I got to get this. And it was like a fun, braggy thing. I said, this is Larry Merchant. Larry Merchant is calling me while I'm giving these two guys a tour. And we had just talked about that picture. And I said, Larry, we're just, talking about the thing. And these guys are questioning what kind of punch it was. And Larry says, of course it was a great punch. Well, because I was there. If you look between his legs, Ali's legs, you have a guy with glasses on the left. On the right, in the back, is a much younger Larry Merchant, to say the least, with his mouth open. And Merchant said, I was right there. It was one hell of a punch. It put him down. There shouldn't be any question about that.
Well, it looked like it was a quick, like you mentioned, a quick, fast punch. Now, I don't know the reputation of Sonny Liston of having a tough chin or someone that, you could just not.
He had a tough chin.
Okay, so he did have a tough chin.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a lot of controversy outside of the fight, but there's been because don't you have to take some type of drug tests after the fight? I don't think there was any drugs found in neither boxer's system.
No, I don't think they did
Okay.
much in the way of drug tests then. And by the way, Sonny Liston was afraid of needles, which is interesting because when he dies, there's a question of was he given a needle, a hot shot that killed him? But he wasn't about to do that himself. He might have been killed by the mob in Las Vegas. That's later. I don't never seen any evidence that either guy had any dope in him or anything.
Right. I just want to clarify that just to make sure. But then another thing is, let's be honest. Back in the 50s, the mob or the mafia had some type of influence in boxing.
Oh yeah.
And this gets into our next topic or the next question I would like to ask you about Jake LaMotta. Jake LaMotta did, I believe, took a dive. At least that's what was portrayed in the Raging Bull film. Now, I don't know if he legitimately took a dive or...
Yeah.
Oh, he did. So, getting into now the middleweight division of Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson putting on 6 different fights and dominating, I guess, a particular period of the middleweight division. Was Sugar Ray Robinson really... they say he was the best pound-for-pound fighter, but was he the best middleweight fighter, in your opinion, or was it Jake LaMotta or Marvin Hagler or somebody else?
I like the way you put that, because certainly he was, by anybody who's got one eye on boxing, top 5 who ever lived, in most people's opinions, number 1. It's hard to get him below number 2. His real name was Walker Smith. He just won zillions of fights, then lost one, zillions of fights, then lost one. But the way you put it is interesting, because he's almost definitely, and once again, it's hard to quantify, the greatest welterweight who ever lived. Probably one of the top 3 middleweights, but he was even better as welterweight. As a middleweight, there was a guy named Harry Greb, Greb, and on pound-for-pound lists, I don't mean by kids who do it now, and they can't even go back more than 10, 15 years. I mean, the people who know this stuff, Harry Greb is one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. So as middleweights, some of the guys are certainly Robinson, Greb, Mickey Walker. I don't know if Hagler was quite that, but Hagler was pretty high up. Then there was Carlos Monzon, Argentina. Carlos Monzon was absolutely fantastic. He fought, for instance, in the 70s. I guess that's the heart of when he fought. LaMotta was a hell of a fighter. Sure, you could say no style. You could say that, but who the hell would want to be in the ring with him? And correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's just one fight that he beat Ray.
Right.
But man, he was a tough dude. There's no question about it. He's not generally considered top, 3 or 4 middleweights though.
Well, Stan, let me ask you a question. I know the movie Rocky. And I don't know if you're a true boxing fan or how much boxing did you watch, but obviously the movie Rocky stands out as one of the greatest boxing films of all time. Do you have any ideas, or who would you classify as the best fighter? Everybody says Muhammad Ali, but I don't know personally who would be your greatest fighter, if you could think of anyone.
I'm not. I was never a big fight fan, so I never fight. I don't watch it, so I guess my two best fighters for me is Sammy Vega and Lucci. So,
okay.
Excuse me, I've got to ask you something.
Go.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I should put that another way. It's all right when you mention Sammy. Is that okay?
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, Sammy actually could have been a great pro. Now, I understand, what he does now with the law firm. That's great. If you're talking to Sammy, please tell him to get his blank down here. I have at least 3 pictures of him in my museum, at least. And then, of course, I've got Greg Kyler and Dwayne Hairston, the other guys he was an amateur with, and obviously Scully and that group. But I would love to get Sammy. Hey, you guys could come with Sammy. As far as, I think you said Starling, correct?
Yep.
Starling was one of the best defensive fighters of the 80s. Definitely a great fighter. I didn't just say good fighter. I think he's overlooked how darn good he was. I don't think there's any question. Now, when you asked Stan about great fighter, you didn't say heavyweight. I understand that.
Right.
So in case you're curious, I'll tell you some of my favorite fighters, if I may, and some of the fighters that I think are the greatest. They're not, necessarily the same. I mean, certainly I'm an Ali guy. Sugar Ray Leonard, Hearns. People forget about Wilfred Benitez, who was right in that group with Duran, who was obviously on the list. But there was a lower weight fighter named Ruben Olivares. Terrific. There was a guy named Joe Gans who fought about 100 years ago. I don't expect you to know the names, but you could look these things up. There was a guy from Brazil, Eater Jaffer. if you pronounce it that way. I'm not good at anything, but English. I'm fair at English. Jofre. So if you really want to know about boxing, you look up these guys. I made a quick list to my side. Certainly, I love Roy Jones. Now,
Right.
at the end of his career, he got beat up a few times. He just wouldn't stop fighting. But if you look at the body of his work, that's a big one. Not just on a particular day, the body of his work. What Roy Jones did, even beating Johnny Ruiz for the heavyweight title. Not that Ruiz was a big shake, but he was good enough. I mean, he was a heavyweight champion.
Mhm.
Jones was he was fantastic. And here's something that matters, because you brought Robinson in early. Again, by any stretch, top 3 who ever lived, maybe number 1. I'm going to go over some of the others in a minute. There's a guy I know whose name was Steve Acunto, Acunto. He was in the boxing world, not a boxer, but in the boxing world, got awards, this and that. A real expert and historian for many decades. He died maybe 7 years ago at 101. He had a house in Mount Vernon. Fantastic. He had his Willie Pep stuff. He knew Willie well. I knew Willie pretty well. He had his Ali stuff. He had all kinds of Rocky Marciano stuff. They were very, very close. When guys go back that many decades, they have a tendency, when you ask who the greatest are, they want to go just way back. They're almost blind to the current stuff. And yet he said at one point that Roy Jones Jr., in his professional opinion, he gets extra weight because of who he was and what he had seen, was as good as Sugar Ray Robinson when he was at the top of his game.
Mm-hmm.
That's talking. Now, as far as all-time greats, Ali, our Willie Pep from Connecticut,
Right.
is he considered top 10? Willie Pep was terrific. Henry Armstrong, got to be probably top 5. He just never stopped. He held 3 titles at the same time. No, I don't mean WBO, WBC, that crap. 3 full weight division titles,
Right.
not half weights, at the same time, and almost won a 4th. That's insane.
Right.
Joe Louis, Robinson, Harry Greb, Benny Leonard, who fought as maybe a lightweight a zillion years ago. That's Benny Leonard. And I think there's an argument for, in the top 10, possibly putting in Sugar Ray Leonard. I mentioned Joe Gans, definitely that Sam Langford, probably Eater Joffer. I might have mentioned 11 guys. But one of my all-time favorites, I'm not saying he goes there, but just a guy that I enjoyed, was Aaron Pryor.
I remember him, right. The Hawk.
Man, Aaron Pryor, he beat Arguello twice, and Arguello was a thrill to watch. Aaron Pryor was just nonstop go. A fantastic fighter.
Right. And so, Rick, sometimes the boxing styles play a role, like how you match up to another boxer. Sugar Ray Robinson's style might have been just a style that gave Jake LaMotta trouble that he couldn't really handle. You got to take into equation that different competition levels, who you're fighting. Take a look at social pressure. When you look at a person like Joe Louis and the type of 12 years being the world heavyweight boxing champion, the longest record.
It's something like 25 defenses. I could be one off, yeah.
Right, exactly.
His name was Joseph Louis Barrow.
And see, it always gets into, well, if each fighter who would fight in their prime, because Joe Louis or Rocky Marciano is not going to get credit for beating Joe Louis when they look at Joe Louis being past his prime. Larry Holmes is not going to get credit for beating Muhammad Ali because Muhammad Ali was past his prime. So when you get two great fighters like Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns, both were kind of at their peak when they fought the first time. Sugar Ray Leonard defeated Thomas Hearns. Very close fight. Could have some question whether the referee stopped the fight a little too soon. But you got to take a lot of different factors in when you're comparing who's the greatest boxer. It's usually either Muhammad Ali or Joe Louis. I mean, you get a lot of other names popping up into the equation, but usually you would hear people say it's either Muhammad Ali 1, Joe Louis 2, or Joe Louis 1, Muhammad Ali 2. But do you take those type of other factors when you're looking at who's the greatest boxer, like the competition that they're fighting, the type of social pressure that they're under?
Yeah, not. I'm sorry, not as much the social pressure, but
Mhm.
more the competition. How many fights? It could even be, did they have that year? Did
Mhm.
they get rushed into it? Were they hurt?
Mhm.
But there is an interesting thing when you mention styles. Um, Ali always had trouble with Kenny Norton.
Right.
Kenny Norton was technically a heavyweight champion for a while. I mean, it's amazing. That was a nemesis of his. Those three fights, maybe all of them could have gone either way. Ali ended up winning two of them, but they're all close. And that's weird. How could that be? What you cannot figure in boxing, this goes to your styles comment, respectfully. It's not like if A beats B and B beats C, that A necessarily beats C. It just doesn't work that way. Thomas Hearns was a great fighter,
Mhm.
but he had a hard time with Iran the Blade Barkley twice.
Right.
Barkley beat him. Is Barkley overall a better fighter than Hearns? Of course not. It was just kind of a nemesis thing. There are a few other things like that. I mentioned Carlos Monzon. He beat Rodrigo Valdez a couple times, but he would have a hard time with him, which is almost another tangent. But certain fighters, if it wasn't for one above them, they probably would have been known better as being greater. If it wasn't for Monzon, Rodrigo Valdez would have been there. Now, Esteban de Jesus was a darn good fighter. He fought Duran 3 times, and let's see, I think Duran won 2 of them. One of those fights I went to in Panama City, Panama. That's a great story in itself.
Mhm.
But if it wasn't for that one guy above him, Duran, de Jesus, his name would have been elevated. There's other examples, and you also cannot look at just one night. I'll give one example of that, then I'll quiet down. I know I'm always eager to go. The night that Tyson fought Buster Douglas, and I want to say that I do think, in a look back to a lot of people, they forget how darn great Tyson was. He was great.
Mhm.
But that night, Buster Douglas was, well, put it this way, he wasn't going to lose. You asked about social pressure, something a little bit to the side of that. Buster's mother had just died. That was in there. And he was ready. And some people said, well, who's Buster Douglas? Well, if you looked at his record, he had a very good record. He was a very good fighter. He came down a few times. He was inconsistent. He had, lost some fights. But he had what it took. And people will say, well, Tyson, lost that fight. Now, you're forgetting the next sentence. Douglas won that fight. But you don't look back in history and say, whether it's styles or the emotional factor that meant Douglas was a better fighter. I don't know what would happen in 5 fights, particularly if Tyson was in perfect shape. Who knows? But on that night, Buster Douglas was absolutely sensational.
Well, let's break down the Mike Tyson James Buster Douglas fight. It looked like to me Mike Tyson made a couple key mistakes. His longtime trainer, I believe what's his name? Mickey Rooney was his original trainer. Well,
you mean Kevin Rooney? Yeah.
Kevin Rooney, yes. Okay, I don't believe Kevin Rooney was his trainer going into that fight. Right. I think Mike Tyson made some changes with his trainer.
Guys, they didn't know what they were doing.
Right. His management team, I believe Jacobs had passed away. I think Billy Clayton was still involved with Mike Tyson. Clayton,
yeah,
right.
What it was, excuse me, just for the record, he had Jimmy Jacobs. Jimmy Jacobs was probably the greatest fight film collector of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I met him. Actually, he wrote some beautiful stuff about my book, and he said that Customato, who trained Patterson and Tyson lived with Customato. I'm bragging there, but I have to say this. Jimmy said that Cuss was captivated by my book. So we had those two guys.
Mm-hmm.
Clayton became the manager later. Jimmy died of leukemia, and then Cuss died. And then there were different guys that came in. Kevin Rooney knew boxing pretty well in the early days. Obviously, Teddy Atlas knew it too, but they didn't know what they were doing that fight. As a matter of fact, if you watch it, I want to make sure I'm not mixing up fights. There's a point that instead of using the metal flat iron on the ice or anything like that, they use what looks like a balloon with water in it. I would hope it would be cold. I don't know how they got it at that point. They held it against his face. Well, I'll just say this: it looked like a balloon. It might have been something else. Yeah, they didn't know what they were doing. But the bottom line is, you can't take too much away from that corner because Tyson lost the fight.
He lost the fight, but if you remember, Tyson, up until, let's say, even that fight, looked like he was not going to lose. Now, some people on the outside saw some flaws in his boxing game. I believe even Larry Holmes believed that he was going to be able to beat him. Larry Holmes would have come across admitting that, well, Ernie Shavers hit harder, but he would still lose. Obviously, Larry Holmes is past his prime when he fights Mike Tyson. But for that 5-year period, it looked like Mike Tyson was just going to be undefeated. But like you say, James Buster Douglas, let's give him credit. He just fought the better fight that particular night. But didn't you see a decline in Mike Tyson's boxing style or career after that fight moving forward?
Oh, sure. And now we'll get to the social pressure part, which, a lot of I've already tried to dismiss with fighters. That's what you have to do. So many times they'll say, well, there's adversity or something going on in my life. I got it. And you're in the ring, you're alone, at least during the 3 minutes. It's not like you can rely on your team. I got that. Tyson's life did get pretty messed up. And if you ever read his book, it's the one that I guess is more or less an autobiography, although we wrote it with somebody. I don't read much, but when I read that book, I had to take a shower. You got to kind of understand where he came from in life, what he went through when he was a kid. He would admit he did a lot of very bad things, but boy, being brought up the way he did, and then it would come back to him. And of course, there was that mess when he was married to, if I may be so bold, that gold digger, Robin Givens. That wasn't helpful. But if you're a fighter, you got to do whatever you can in your head. Now I'm going into the ring.
Right.
That's it.
And what role did Don King play in Mike Tyson's demise? Did he have any factors in your opinion?
Well, I don't know that he played into his demise at all. I mean, Don King has a bad rap and should in many ways because he essentially ended up with more money than he should have, and where fighters didn't get it. Now, in some cases, he would say, well, I made, whether it's Tim Witherspoon or Ali or other people, yeah, but because of me, you made this much money. Correct. But the guy was risking his life, didn't make the money he was supposed to make. I'll tell you a quick King story, and I got stories that shoot off. That's why, it's always hard to get these in. A friend of mine who used to be the head of boxing for Showtime. And matter of fact, his brother is a very, very close friend of mine. The Showtime guy was I knew through the first guy. Don't worry, I'll put this together. Their mom dies. The funeral is in New Haven maybe 15 years ago. And because of the Showtime connection, Don King comes to the funeral. And he was very nice. He was very respectful. So Don King, picture Don King, please. He's sitting in this funeral home inside for the service. And a few people, including my really good friend, the other son, says some stuff. Don King is sitting there, etc. Later on, my friend Bruce Jacobs, well, I haven't seen him in years, though, I must say, a New Haven guy, he emails or texts my friend Alan, whose mother had just died. And they each have a sense of humor. And he complained in the, whatever it was, I think was an email, he complained about the funeral service. Who complains about a funeral service? But having a great sense of humor, Bruce, who was sitting there, complained that he had an obstructed view. Just picture Don King was sitting in front of him.
The hair, yeah.
It was kind of cool.
Right.
I certainly met Don King. I met a whole bunch of those guys, as you know. It's just fun to think about. I also started thinking about what heavyweight champs I had met because you wanted to do some concentration on heavyweight champs. So most of these are just a few words. A few of them were, including Ali, of course, were real conversations. These are the heavyweight champs I've met. I don't mean just saw. I mean said hello to, talked to for a moment. Ali, Foreman, Fraser, Joe Louis, Lennox Lewis, Larry Holmes, Ernie Terrell, Michael Spinks, Leon Spinks, Johnny Ruiz, Jersey Joe Walcott, Jimmy Ellis, Kenny Norton, and Mike Tyson. Oh, and Greg Page, Deontay Wilder, and Roy Jones. And here's a bit of trivia. Jimmy Ellis, Greg Page, and Muhammad Ali were all heavyweight champs. What else do they have in common? I mean, there's no reasonable way you can guess this one.
That's why you're the expert, and so you got to let us know. I don't know.
High school.
Okay.
The three of them went to the same high school. 3 heavyweight champions of the world.
So that would have had to been in Louisville, Kentucky, if they went. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was in Louisville.
Right. Let me ask you a question. I guess I can ask you, Stan. I mean, obviously, people know the movie Rocky stands out as one of the greatest boxing films of all time. But was Rocky better than Raging Bull? I don't know how much you know about Raging Bull, Stan, but did you watch that movie?
Well, coming from Philadelphia, everyone's seen Rocky at least 4 or 5 times.
Right.
Rocky I've seen. I think I may have seen Raging Bull. That was a black. I want to say it was a black and white movie.
Right. It was.
That's an older movie. I can't compare the two because it's just they're too far apart.
Well, it was actually portrayed.
I saw them.
Excuse me. It was actually portrayed to be an older movie. The film Raging Bull was filmed in 1980, but it was documenting Jake LaMotta's career in the 50s. So when they had fights in black and white, that's why they made the film come out black and white when they made it. But technically, the movie was filmed 1980.
I can't compare the two because I don't know that I saw Raging Bull.
You don't know if you saw Raging, okay?
No, Rocky, of course, I've seen that several times.
Which is your favorite Rocky film? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it was 6 Rockies, if I'm not mistaken.
If I had to pick it would be the first one, and then the one with James Brown singing. Coming to America.
That was Rocky 5.
Rocky 5. There you go.
See, I think Rocky 1, maybe Rocky 3 with Mr. T. Clubber Lang could be a close second, or could be better. I don't know, but Rocky 1 obviously stands out. I think it won an Oscar for that.
Rocky 1 because of, not so much because it was a boxing movie, but because the way the movie, he wrote the movie, he shot the movie, just as a production, that's what stands out. Yeah, more than it being a fight movie, because I'm not a, I appreciate and admire and have videotaped and done a lot of in boxing, but I'm not a big boxing fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Excuse me. What bothered me about Rocky 1 is there was a little too much damage taken, and they made him too, stupid or ignorant. That changed later on. But I certainly enjoy those movies. But I do have a comment. Some people were saying, well, how does he even get this fight, the supposed Rocky? At some point, they mentioned his record. But if he was the kind of guy that was just thrown in at the last minute and he didn't have a trainer and he didn't know what he was doing, that didn't mean that he was a bad fighter, even though he was, in theory, he was awkward. So it's not that this guy should have no chance at all. And in fact, Apollo Creed's manager, when he watched him, he could see that when Rocky was doing what he was supposed to do, that he could hurt you. As far as the best ones, people's opinions differ. I understand that. But the montage at the beginning of number 3, when they had that fast music, and they were showing Clubber Lang coming up and Rocky knocking out guys, I thought that was great. And by the way, with Raging Bull, I'm bouncing back and forth to use the time. That's Joe Pesci, right? Yeah, who plays Raging Bull's LaMotta's brother. Did you know that he was tied in closely to the Four Seasons?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. He was close with those guys. One quick Rocky thing. Once in a while in the winter, I'll be outside shoveling my brains out, sweating and pouring down, and my wife is afraid I'm going to have a heart attack. And I've done other things in the yard that I just shouldn't be doing, just, really working hard. And she has given me a hard time, supposedly because she cares, She doesn't want to collect the insurance on me right away. And when I've had the opportunity, therefore, to say to her more than once, which has to do when Rocky was coming back to fight. So I've said to my wife, now get this, please, from the first Rocky movie all the way back then, I've often called my wife Adrian. Her name is Laurie, but I called her Adrian. Hey, you're Adrian. So when she's giving me a hard time and I'm standing out there like I'm half dead, but I refuse to stop working and she's giving me a hard time, I've said, Adrian, I never asked you to stop being a woman. Please, Adrian, please. Don't ask me to stop being a man.
Right. And that was actually, he said that in Rocky 2, I believe. I guess he got retired from boxing. Then all of a sudden he wanted to fight again because he was just having hard times. But I do remember that comment that you just made. One trivia, it looked like to me in Rocky, Apollo Creed was portraying Muhammad Ali's boxing style, his voice, his charisma. And Sylvester Stallone might have been portraying either Joe Frazier or it could have been Rocky or Marciano.
But his hero from when he was a kid in the movie, supposedly, was Rocky Marciano. He had that picture up when when Burgess Meredith took a look at it. But he did not come in as a Joe Frazier kind of guy.
He didn't?
Joe Frazier was a much, much better boxer. There's a little bit of a tie-in with Chuck Wepner, the Bayonne Bleeder. That's more like what Rocky was.
And I think the Chuck Wepner fight with Muhammad Ali, now, I think Muhammad Ali kept saying that Sylvester Stallone is stealing some of his ideas. But wasn't the Chuck Wepner fight against Ali the kind of starting point for Sylvester Stallone thinking that he wanted to make a movie, or is it more to it?
Well, that's somewhere in the beginning part. Now Wepner was a tough guy, but he certainly was nothing great. He knocked down Ali in that fight. He hit him, I think, a right hand. The other times Ali was down was with the left, somewhere around the chest. But, and you could look this up, Wepner's foot, doesn't mean it was on purpose, was on Ali's foot when he knocked him down. Now, an interesting thing is when he knocked him down, he turned to his corner. Al Braverman was the guy in his corner. And one of them mumbled something like, start the car, we're going to be the champ, something like that. And of course, Ali got up and beat him up. But there is a very quick story, and it's up to you what you do with time. I've heard more than once, I've talked to Chuck about this too. Before the fight, Wepner said to his then wife, he certainly got married again, when this fight's over, you're going to be sleeping with a heavyweight champion of the world. Now, this is a good story. Again, I hope it's true, but supposedly, you're going to be sleeping with a heavyweight champion of the world. So the fight's over, and Wepner loses. And Wepner's wife comes up to him and says, Chuck, there's just something like this. One thing I'm not sure. Am I supposed to go to Mr. Ali's dressing room, or is he coming into my room?
I knew you was going to say something like that, Rick. I knew that was coming.
The story. And he fought Andre the Giant once.
He did.
Oh, yeah. And Andre, who was the real deal. It doesn't mean he knew any wrestling moves, but he just forget about it. He picked up Wepner and he could have thrown him out of the stadium or something.
Well, I think actually wrestler Gorilla Monsoon fought Muhammad Ali. I think they had
Inoki fought him.
Inoki?
Antonio Inoki fought him, and Ali got hurt. And they called it a draw, but it was ridiculous. Inoki got down on the ground, probably never got up. He was like a crab going around, and he'd be kicking Ali, and Ali'd be leaning over trying to hit him. But Ali got hurt because his legs were kicked that hard so many times. It ended up being silly. It's not like a mixed thing like you've had with guys now, like, I don't know, like with Jake Paul or any of those kind of things. And then Ali and Inoki became very good friends years later.
And then when you get into Raging Bull, classic film, great portrayal. But one thing that I sent you the link about the Sugar Ray Robinson, Jake LaMotta fights.
Thank you again.
This Valentine's Day Masquerade, when it looked like Sugar Ray Robinson kind of destroyed Jake, but really that was a close fight up into towards the latter rounds. He couldn't knock down Jake LaMotta. And then if you look at the movie Raging Bull, Robert De Niro would say, "You didn't knock me down. You didn't knock me down, Ray." But he did not actually say that after the fight.
And I thank you for sending me that, because I did see that supposedly that was just a dramatic thing. Supposedly he didn't say it. Hey, there's even a question about whether Duran specifically said "no mas."
Right.
Actually, those words. I mean, that was the effect he gave, but whether he said it or not was unclear. It was so interesting what you sent me. in general, what you can do in movies, it doesn't have to be a sports movie. You go online and you mention the movie and say true or false or how accurate or myths. And it's so interesting that you could see where it would show things like that. Now, I don't know if that particular fact is on any of those Snopes or any of the others, but I certainly appreciate, what you said. But just because it's from the movie, it's in our culture. And sometimes when friends of mine and I are just fooling around, we'll say things like, "Hey, Ray, you never got me down, Ray. You never got me down."
Right.
And by the way, in real life, LaMotta really was, a gruff, kind of uncouth, jealous, rough guy. That's a real life thing.
So the movie kind of portrayed Jake LaMotta very closely in most areas, but some of the things that happened in the fight or throughout the movie, like, the comment that he made towards the end of the Sugar Ray Robinson fight, that did not actually happen. But the fight was very similar to Jake LaMotta's style. I mean, the movie Raging Bull was very similar to the real Jake LaMotta.
Sure, and there was something that, I guess we could look it up, but supposedly LaMotta had said a few times, it's funny. He said something like, "I fought Sugar Ray Robinson so many times, it's amazing I didn't get diabetes." That's a pretty good line, not bad.
Right. Great classic fights. When you get into Raging Bull, I mean, that's a great picture. Sad ending to some degree. But you still would say Sugar Ray Robinson was just a better fighter than Jake LaMotta.
There's no question. You made a point about styles, and of course, sometimes just having to use very high-tech language, clayons, makes a difference. And LaMotta, I mean, the damage he took was ridiculous. These days, they wouldn't allow that. They would stop a fight.
Right.
That's a whole other thing as far as when they should stop a fight. But no, he was no Sugar Ray Robinson, but he gets credit for what he did. I mean, in other words, it wasn't just luck or one time he fought like that. He was in plenty of really, really tough fights. Really tough.
Yeah. And then there's been some reports in that document that I sent you that Jake LaMotta had to lose weight. He didn't have the stamina towards the end of the fight. That kind of contributed, but still, you got to just give Sugar Ray Robinson his due, that he was really just a better fighter. And the styles do play a role to some degree, but there's a lot of classic history about that era with those 6 fights that they had. And again, I don't know who really is the greatest fighter. I don't know if Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali at their prime, who would have won. But then if you look at the facts that Ali lost a fight to Norton, he lost a fight to Joe Frazier. The third fight to Ken Norton was questionable. Many people felt Ken Norton actually defeated Ali in that fight. And I would have to say Ali was kind of in his prime, maybe up into the Leon Spinks fight. So, but then you made an excellent point too. 3 of Ali's best years of his prime, from his speed to his strength, was kind of taken away from him. So that has to be looked into the equation. So I don't know, I mean, who would be considered the better fighter, but certainly it draws a lot of good conversation. And it was a pleasure having you on, Rick Kaletsky. This was long overdue. I should have had you on a lot sooner, but I appreciate, again, you brought a lot of good information and fun information. And Stan, you have anything you wanted to ask?
No, it's always an interesting conversation, and I love being like the fly on the wall here in the the depths and the greatness of one of the best sports on the planet, boxing.
Boxing, exactly.
No doubt.
Exactly.
I thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate the time, the opportunity, and the excellent questions. And I want to go back to what Stan said. Tell Sammy to get down here. Grab him, will you, please?
I'll see Sammy later on today, and I will. I'll mention it to him.
Yeah,
absolutely.
As I said, he's on the wall. This isn't just Ali. I've got a whole bunch of fighters going way back in a whole Connecticut section. And although I'm always ready to go, I know we're at the end of the show, so I'll stop.
Yeah.
Well, I will absolutely talk to Sammy.
Okay. Rick, it was our pleasure. Had a great time having you as a special guest on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show. And as I say every single week, if there's any last commentaries that you would like to make, feel free to do so.
Well, I know we don't want to stray from the subject very much, but I don't know what you guys are doing today. I'm waiting to see the fourth indictment. That's all I got.
Okay. All right.
He's waiting for the knockout punch.
Sunday. That'll probably come this week.
Right. All right. We'll wait
Thank
for that.
you very much.
You're welcome, Rick. Our pleasure.
All right.
Okay. Take care.
All right, my friends. We'll take a short break, and we will be right back. Morning Talk, J.C. McCauley, along with Jonathan Small. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
It's stressful.
Hey, Hartford, Connecticut, I'm talking to you. We got to get out and vote. Vote for Stan McCauley. It's our time. We got to rise up and take it back. Vote for Stan McCauley.
Vote for Stan. You got to vote for Stan McCauley. Vote for Stan. Vote for Stan. Oh yeah.
It's more to politics than just what your social covers. And it ain't somewhere written down in bold letters. Don't just take my word for it, do your research. Think of your future, look at your bigger picture. Shooting tie, clean up, unity for the righteous. Plotting on action, hands on access. With a light source vision, door to door knocking. Guerrilla style marketing, brainstorm as a collective. Real neighborhood suggestions. Only we know what it is where we living. To make real life decisions. Move on facts, make it manifest back.
You gotta vote for Stan McCauley. Vote for Stan. Take a look around. Is opportunity flow into your house? Are you working? Wait, can you save some money? And is your neighborhood safe? Or is it a homicide every night?
My name is Marlon E. Starler Sr. Many of you may know me as the two-time welterweight champion of the world. I'm here to tell you that Democrat J. Stan McCauley, as our next mayor, will fight for you until the last bell. Help me throw a knockout punch. Go out and vote for Stan the man.
My name is J. Stan McCauley, and I approve this message.
Hi.
My name's J. Stan McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We're back. Jonathan Small in the house. Great interview, as always.
Well, a fun interview, too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it might have came across. I was having a good time to go along with interviewing Rick Kaletsky. And like I said, we had the pleasure of having him on a few times. Morning Talk Live, and then All About You, and went to his boxing museum, and that was real nice. You know,
that was incredible.
Nice. Exactly.
His museum is incredible.
But he knows his boxing knowledge. I mean, he's just on top of everything, you know. So
he has a whole museum in his house, like the whole first floor, or the ground level.
The ground level, you went in his basement.
You come in to the driveway, and it's a really nice house. Drive up the driveway, and it's like a creek along the side or something. And then you get there, and there's it's like a private museum. It's like you're like a special parking for one person, and then you come in, and you're in a museum. It's phenomenal, and it's like it's something you have to go to and experience.
And he claims it's much better now. We went about a good 5 to 10 years ago, at least 5 years ago. Between that time span,
I remember when it was, because it was around the time that Luke Bronin was He was not mayor yet, so he was running for mayor.
2015.
Right, so
at least 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years ago. Yeah. Because I remember being on the phone with somebody from Hartford about why he was voting for Luke. He was breaking ranks, but he was going to vote for Luke. Right. I remember having that conversation in Rick's driveway,
right. But again, he's one of the best, Rick Kaletsky, as far as his boxing expertise, history, knowledge. You can't go wrong having someone like him if you want to find out about boxing in particular. And he's traveled to a lot of different states too, But we really didn't get too much into that part because I just wanted to really focus on boxing.
Right, and he is like a boxing expert, not like just on Muhammad Ali.
Oh,
I mean, he's like everybody.
Yes.
The whole.
Yeah, that's why I said he has to be a boxing expert. You know, what else can you call somebody like that?
Mm-hmm.
But I had my mind on one topic, and then speaking to Peter Knight, switched my whole mentality because I want to talk about. I heard that UPS had they had negotiated, I guess, a new contract.
Yeah.
So the drivers, the package handlers, they're going to get a tremendous pay increase. No more mandatory overtime on their days off, air-conditioned trucks. And I'll just leave it at this. If you compare UPS to FedEx, I mean, they kind of run a similar operation. But I think here's where the Teamsters Union do make a difference. I mean, some people say the unions are not really that needed anymore. But they negotiated an excellent contract for UPS employees. I think the drivers now, towards the end of the 5-year contract, they're going to be able to max out their pay rate to about $49 an hour plus benefits. No, not just. I think the pay rate will be $49, but they still have their pension, their health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
The package handlers are going to be able to make, after 5 years, up to $25 an hour. So UPS is a good career. I mean, sometimes we overlook a lot of occupations. And UPS is a big operation too. I mean, they probably doing other things. I guess package handling.
Well, that's a little bit of a change of mind and expression. I remember having a conversation about UPS before.
Well, the work is still grunt. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, you can't become a driver usually without going through the warehouse as a package handler, and that's where they have the high turnover ratio. Now, I don't know if more money is gonna make people stick with the company. It's not an easy job, you know. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you still got to be in that truck.
You old school working for your money.
It is. But it's a great company, and if you can withstand it, you know, the mentality you have to have to go day after day and
work ethic. Called work ethic. You got to have a good work ethic.
But this is work, though. This is a little hard. This is like
Jonathan. Most people on the planet actually do work.
But I'm saying the physical. But we're talking a package handler at UPS. They have a reputation of people.
Right, but I'm saying it's work. There's a lot of people are not. There is a whole group of people who derive satisfaction out of a good day's work. I know that may sound strange to some folk, but a lot of people like to work just as much as folk. Like we were just got finished talking to Rick about professional athletes, boxing. That's some work.
Well, that's like saying football is
physical
danger. Yeah, football is more physical nature than baseball. Although you can get hit by that baseball.
You can get hit by the baseball, but you work. You go to the gym. You practice. You work. I'm saying every person involved in professional sports works.
Right.
There's all of the behind the scenes stuff, the sacrifices. So people that go to work and do menial labor, that's work.
Yeah.
But it's not like maybe I'm not finding the right words to express it. It's not that it's work.
Well, the high turnover ratio of a UPS or a FedEx, and it's not just me.
We should get someone in here that works for UPS.
Yeah, that would be a good, show to some degree. I mean, there's even talk about UPS operation too, beyond just that. Where you can go from UPS. I guess an employee or corporate staff would be good to discuss this too. But the high turnover ratio has been a problem for a long time. Some people can stick with UPS 20, 25 years. Start off as a package handler.
Some do because they have retirement and everything else.
But I've had friends who's left after one day. It's just
they don't have good work ethic. Well, how you work one day and quit?
Well, you got to look at the job of being in a trailer. I don't know if you've ever done that type of work, Stan. Now, I'll be honest, it's not a simple job to be in a trailer, and you got all these packages coming that you got to load in a certain amount of time, and you may only get a 10-minute break because you're working part-time.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's not an easy
Right.
Well, some jobs are more. Now, this gets into the next topic that I really want to talk about, homeschooling. But some jobs are going to always be easier physical nature than other jobs.
That's true.
And it don't mean because you can't stick with UPS, you don't have a strong work ethic. You just may not be cut out or want to deal with being a package handler. I wouldn't put a person down. And say,
I'm not putting person down. They applied for the job.
Because
they went there. Yeah, they got to work. They say something about it. You know, if you don't want to do that, then don't apply.
Don't apply. Yeah.
It's not like It's not like they opted not to do that kind of work. They wanted to do the work. They went there. They applied. They went through all the trials and tribulations to get the job. Then after one day, I can't do this.
They get you with the money. I think that's where UPS has had the reputation. When I went there in the 80s, it was the money, and hard to believe $8 was considered a lot of money today. But now you hear $25 an hour. Well, you can make that towards the end of your 5-year contract. Health plan, health benefits, insurance, pension plan.
That's true, but you do a price comparison. So like how much was a dozen eggs? when did you apply?
Senior year high school, 89.
89. How much was a dozen eggs in 1989?
I can't remember, man, but I'm just saying.
Well, I'm gonna ask the artificial intelligence. And to bring the artificial intelligence in here and ask the Alexa, how much was a dozen eggs in 1989?
According to an Alexa Answers contributor, in 1950, a dozen eggs cost 60 cents. In comparison, that would be $6.50 in today's dollars.
Well, that works.
Well, he went from 1950, Alexa. I didn't.
Never mind, Alexa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But let's get into this homeschooling. I sent you so many texts yesterday and talking to Peter Knight and his wife. Hope I'm not out of line.
$6.50 a dozen.
A dozen.
Today.
It's expensive.
60 cents in 1950.
Yeah.
So a dozen eggs. If you're making $25 an hour, that's like, 1/4 of your pay.
Your pay, yeah.
I mean, an hour. You work 15 minutes to get a dozen eggs. So the $25 an hour sounds like that, but the buying power is the same. So while what is the buying power of the money you make? Mm-hmm. More than the amount you're making. People get all jazzed up about the amount. But things are really basically stay the same. Apartments are still the same price because you're getting paid. The buying power of your money gets you today what it used to get you in 1970. Mm-hmm. Relative to your pay. But go on.
Well, and again, that's a good topic. I mean, and one last thing. I had wanted one time to talk about infrastructure development, the gas, electric, water company. I don't know if I was going to tie UPS into the conversation, but who knows. And then all of a sudden I was talked out of it by someone when I had actually Scott Jellison, CEO of MDC, booked, and that was going to be the real topic. And then all of a sudden someone convinced me, well, he's better suited just to talk about MDC.
Oh, it wasn't me.
No, it wasn't you. I'm not going to call the person's name, but I think you might have an idea but who I'm talking about. But again, He had convinced me to just change the title, and I shouldn't have even mentioned that to him. I don't know why.
Outside forces.
Outside
forces to help produce your show.
Well, the whole thing is MDC was such a big topic at that time with the protesting of the water and sewage flooding. It just seemed like that might have made sense to talk to Scott about that and wait to another guest to talk about infrastructure. But this whole thing about homeschooling after texting and talking to Peter Knight, again, I remember you mentioning one time that you were kind of in favor of not sending your two daughters to public school, and then somebody talked you out of it. Now, I can't speculate your reasons why, because I always say you and Peter are very similar. I don't know if you was because you just didn't have faith in the Hartford or the Hartford public school system or some safety concerns, but it's kind of strange when you're hearing, you're not going to send your child to a public school or any school, and you're just going to do the teaching itself.
I strongly considered homeschooling my two daughters.
Right. But see, here's the thing about this homeschooling. You don't have to be certified as a teacher. You can still teach your child.
Yeah, they're your children.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to be like passing the examinations to say that you're qualified to do homeschool.
Every parent qualified to teach their kids.
I mean, teach them, yeah, but I'm saying, like, okay, and I don't mean this the wrong way, but I don't think you would have the same credentials as a science major because you didn't go to college or you didn't study science. So
if every kid graduated public schools as straight-A students and they were all trying to get into Harvard, but they can't because so many kids are getting in, then I would accept that. But the fact of the matter is most kids can't read past the third grade coming out of public school. So, I think parents can help their kids.
Right. But I mean, the whole ins and outs of the CMT test scores, would the students still have to take that even though you're homeschooling?
I don't know the ins and outs of homeschooling in terms of what's required by the state, if there are things required by the state. But I have heard that kids homeschooled test right up there with some of the best kids in the country when it comes to schooling. So if you're going to homeschool your kids, you don't just keep them at home and tell them to learn something. There's a whole plan on what you're going to teach them. And I think one of the biggest things that came out of the pandemic was the fact that when kids were being taught at home, a lot of parents were shocked at how quickly the day ended. Because a lot of the time in school is spent doing stuff other than learning.
Right.
And if you are sending your children to school to learn, then there's a reasonable expectation on the part of the parents that the children are going to learn. I don't want them learning every other thing under the sun. I'm sending them there to learn how to read, write, do math.
Right.
They're not there to learn anything other than the basics. I'll teach them the rest. It's not the school's responsibility to do that.
Well, the Board of Education, at least I was under the impression that you have to take physical education as part of your curriculum. They usually have you take music and arts. I don't know if anything dramatic has changed how you work around that, because I really didn't get a chance to talk to Peter about all of these things. But you're right. It has been documented that homeschooling is kind of outperforming, let's just say, the public school. Now, I think when you get into private schooling, that might still be a little bit different. But certainly the public school systems in many cases, but you got to take a look at a lot of other factors when you are talking about the public school systems. And why would homeschooling be better for your student than sending them to a public school?
Those, I think, are reasons that are, up for conversation, but they really are determined by the parent. It's like, why would a Volkswagen be better than a Ford?
Right.
Some expert can go on and on and on, but at the end of the day, it's the consumer who makes that decision as to whether or not he or she buy a particular item. Same thing when it comes to your kid. There's reasons why parents choose to teach their children at home, or to put them in a private school or a religious institution. Though these are decisions that parents make as of right now. So there are many forces who would like to take that decision-making power away from parents, because they figure that they and some other grand entity can do a better job of raising your children.
Well, see, you say raising your children. I thought sending your child to a school system is to get your child properly educated. That's not to raise your child.
Well, there's a lot of people who would have a discussion with you that would and I'm thinking Peter might be one of them. Who would challenge that notion with vigor.
With vigor, right?
Right, because
But excuse me. There's a lot of things. And I don't know if this is really a factor of the social interaction that kids can kind of miss out towards interacting with other kids. I don't think you really bought into that even during the pandemic. You were saying that there's ways that kids could still interact.
Kids interact all the time. They have friends in the community, in the neighborhood. They go to social events, churches, synagogues, mosques, boys clubs, girls clubs. It's not like the only place kids can interact is at school. That's ridiculous.
But if you let's just say, for instance, you're a kid, and I guess you could get around this area too. You want to play on the basketball team. So now, if you're homeschooling your kid, and your kid is not a member of a particular school, would he be eligible now to play on the basketball team? See, there's a lot of other factors that you got to look into.
I'm not that keyed into school sports. I understand that school sports are very, very important component. But part of the problem is that there are a lot of competing leagues that are outside of the system of school sports that are very, very popular and to some degree undermining the ability of school sports to stay competitive.
Right.
So you don't need to be in a school to be involved in a baseball league, a football league, a basketball league.
But is that like saying now you could play if your kid wants to play sports, he would still be able to play on a team if he's not a member of a high school team and compete, and his game or his playing game could still be just as competitive and credited as a student that's on a high school basketball.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We were talking about boxing earlier, and Sammy Vega. I don't know of a whole lot of schools that have boxing programs.
Well, boxing is an individual sport. Basketball, football, like a team orientation.
Right,
sport.
but I'm saying that it's not done. There are a lot of sports besides the traditional ones you hear about in school. There's fencing, there's lacrosse, there's soccer. There's the number of sports that are team sports are go on and on and on. They're not all embraced by the school system. It would be nice if they were, but they aren't.
But you still would kind of be in favor of you're not still like Peter because he thinks the whole school system should be just I don't want to put words in his mouth, but reconstructed. I mean,
I know many people. I have friends of mine who believe that.
Okay.
True. Yeah.
But there's still a value of having your public school system, though. Still, would you still say that's the case?
There's a value in having a public school system that is functioning and delivering quality education that can be realized at the end of the year for every student, and graduating kids who are capable, able to and compete, competitive in the marketplace. When you graduate in school, find out that you're nowhere near being even remotely competitive. That's a problem.
That's a problem
because you spent 12 years in a system that did not prepare you for the real world.
So the better solution would be to fix the public school system more than saying we don't need the public school system and you just homeschool your children.
Right.
That would still be more logical of an approach.
Yes.
Because every parent is not cut out to do homeschooling. There's a lot of factors that they may have the drive and the will, but time, if you're working, if it's other factors, your house may have dysfunctional issues. I mean, let's be honest. Every household is not.
I think those are separate issues from right. The people who want to homeschool their kids do.
Right.
There are a lot of people who would homeschool their kids if they understood the options were available and the resources necessary to do so can be realized. But the majority of people don't want to teach their kids at home. That is not the majority.
Right.
So there will always be a public school system. Now, I think some of the problem is that the public school system, in many cases, is failing. This is failing the kids. It's failing society, and that needs to be replaced.
And then that's a major contributing factor of a lot of other problems that we're having in our society.
Absolutely.
Just coming along from the public school system. And sometimes it's kind of sad to always knock the public school system, to always put a black eye on it, saying it's just a failure. Most kids are not going to turn out well going through the public school system. I think that's kind of still a sad cry if that's true. And there's been some statistic that will show you a lot of kids. Now, I hate to say inner city public school systems, but that seems to be where you're really having the bulk of your problems at, more than other school systems.
Certain systems are not performing optimally. Others do very well. There are plenty of public school systems that are very, very good school systems. The problem comes about when you have school systems that don't perform well, and the adults in those systems make excuses for why it's not working rather than to fix it.
Well, see, the thing is, if problems are being brought into the public school system to go along with the way the public school systems is already operating under, okay, you have your house, and your house is not really doing everything that it needs to be doing. And then, and I'm using the house, let's say, as the school system. Now you have a mentality of kids growing up, bringing baggage, bringing poor behavioral issues into the school system. And now the school system has to coexist and function together with those students bringing bad elements, with a curriculum that's probably not really up to top notch, maybe outdated in many areas. You bring in all of those factors together at one time. Teachers unions, let's say, what role do they play in the situation? The Board of Education, what role do the Board of Education play? And you're putting all of these elements together, Stan, in one component. It doesn't seem like anything on a large scale good can come out of it.
Well, that's not true.
That's not true.
Lots of good can come out of it if all of those players that you mentioned, all those interests that you mentioned, put first the children that they're all there to help grow and educate. It takes many, many different elements to run a school system. And they all have to work in harmony. And when they do, you get great school systems. When they don't, you get dysfunctional school systems. And so, you're no stronger than the weakest link. So you've got, the teachers union. Yeah, they play a big role. The janitors union, the administrators union, the principals union, the assistant principals union, the union for the paras, and you can go on and on and on with all of the unions. But the unions have contracts with the school system to protect their employees. All right, so the union isn't the problem. The administration isn't the problem. The problem is the system is just not working correctly. And what are you going to do to help fix that system relative to the problems that have been identified so that it can be back online doing what it's supposed to do? It's like when your car breaks down. Your car is a system, from the wheels to the lug nuts to the engine to the timing of the computer, the engine timing. There's a whole lot of systems.
Right.
And one part fails, the whole system goes down. You got flat tires, your car runs great, but there's no tires on it. So it can be little things, or it could be a catastrophic failure where all of the systems fail.
Right.
It just requires some maintenance and some oversight from outside entities to push back some of the operational corruption.
Right. But again, people have turned the answer or the solution into sending your child to a private school or chartered school. This over the years have become the quick fix. Well, I don't know if it's a quick fix.
Those systems run better than the larger public school. So parents are exercising their option to move their kids around to get a better education wherever they can find it and afford it. Up to and including, forget all of them, let's bring the kids home. We know what they're getting here.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they're your kids. So who bears the burden of responsibility? As far as I'm concerned, it's my responsibility to make sure the kids get taught. Now I have options as to how they learn.
Right.
From sending them to an elite school, to a public school, to a parochial school, to schooling them at home.
Right.
Those are all options.
Well, see, options are good to have. You know, that's the beauty of having more options. And then you can decide which one is the best fit for your circumstance. Many people may not have those options. So everything has to be looked into the whole big picture of a particular issue.
Well, that's true.
You know, you just don't have the options that you just named, Stan. You know, those 3 or 4 different options. So still, the solution can't be always private school, charter school, and even homeschooling.
Well, there are many solutions.
There's many, yeah, but the public schools, that seems to still be the main need that needs to get corrected and gets fixed, which still seems to be the hardest obstacle to fix. And again, you know, the numbers kind of speak for themselves.
Well, hold that thought.
No.
Pick it up on the other side of the break. Stick and stay. We'll be right back.
Right.
Hartford is run by the Democrat Party. It's a single party town. And it would make no difference if it was a 2-party town or if it was run by Republicans. All right? Anytime an organization runs a thing, the organization that manages or runs it wants to remain in power. When a political party runs the responsibility of governing your city, they're more concerned about remaining in power than they are concerned about providing needs for you, the constituent. It's your government, not the party's government. That's my only issue with the party. I'm a Democrat, all right? But I will never be embraced and accepted by the Democrat Party in theory because I'm not towing the party line. You understand what I'm saying? So the party needs someone to run for mayor. The mayor is an instrument, and he is a component of the machine that is city government. But he's less accountable to you and more accountable to the party. And the party has an apparatus by which to hold him accountable. The town committee. All right. And then the chairman of the party for the local municipality. And then the chairman of the state. And then and on and on and on. And the president and all that other stuff. And so the state committees. All right. So they want to vet you. So you run for some local office first and see if you can be trusted, this, that, the third. Can you be trusted to lie, cheat, steal, put out lies, take in cash? Can you be trusted to do that? If you can't, then we can bring you in. All right, but we always got to hold you at bay because the power is tight. The power is like an aphrodisiac. People like it. It's worse than cocaine, right? They want the power, and once they get a taste of the power, they want to hold on to the power because the power is literally to give projects up or down. That's it, all right? But the power is not meant for that. The power is there to manage the system on behalf of you all, the residents. Okay. But when you as a constituent are not satisfied because there's people being murdered and it doesn't seem like anyone's giving it any attention, and you feel that your investigative agencies like the police department should be looking into these things, you then become a thorn in the side of the people who are supposed to be doing stuff. All right? Or you have a community review, like a civilian review board. And the civilian review board flags particular incidents that happen by police officers. But those incidents might be a liability to the city. So the city is crushing those things from going any further because if they do so, in theory, they'll expose themselves to a liability and they can be sued for millions of dollars. So they never sees the light of day. So you, the constituent, who's supposed to be in charge of all of this, are kept in the dark. There's no transparency because they don't want you to know what's going on with your government because it is a threat to their power. So if you want any of that to change, you need to elect somebody who you can hold accountable as opposed to the party installing someone who is beholden and accountable to them. This is not rocket science. Very simple. Very, very simple. Very simple. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't have the capacity to hold accountable your elected officials. They want you to think that way because then you accept the fact that you don't have accountability over it. But you didn't put them there. The party put them there. Understand? The party put them in office, not you. You think your votes put them there, but it didn't. It only takes 35 votes to get into the office of mayor. That's the town committee. If those 35 people come out and vote for them, they're in. They don't need you to come out. All right? And so you have the illusion of choice, the illusion of a modicum of control that you think you have, that you find that the rude awakening comes 3 weeks after they get in office. You get the old royal shaft because you didn't put them there. You understand? If you put them there, they would be beholden to you. If you put them there, as an elected representative of the people, you are beholden to the people, not the party. And that's why Hartford is in the shape it's in. Because your elected officials are beholden to the party.
Hi.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Oh, yeah. All right, we're back.
Well, again, I think I kind of made my point, or at least I was able to address this issue about homeschooling. I think the key thing is, your education or your training, schooling, it has a big impact long term, not just while you're in school.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you can debate, well, what I'm learning in school, is it really going to matter once I become an adult? Is anybody asking me about English or reading or anything like that? But certainly to graduate from school and then be able to move on is a good, barometer of where your career can move towards. Doesn't mean because you get a poor education that your career and life is pretty much over. Doesn't always mean that you get a great education that you're going to have the best, brightest future. Neither. But everything, but usually the pattern is a poor education leads to a poor quality of standard of living long term, and vice versa. Good education usually means a good standard of living long term, but there are some exceptions to the rule.
There's always exceptions, but I think it's a pretty well foregone conclusion that if you have a good education, you have a much better chance at success because you know things. The alternative would be, do you know how to access information to get you the answers you need to move you forward in whatever it is you're trying to get done? So there are many people who believe that education needs to change in terms of what we're teaching people to learn how to do. Are we teaching them how to memorize information that they can get? Like, you can find out anything you want to know with your phone.
Right.
So how do you what is the practical application of the information that you have relative to the things you're trying to get done? All right, so there are things you need to know and learn, but a lot of time is spent not necessarily learning the right things or the right way, listening to some experts.
Yeah.
And so I'm not an educational expert, so I can't speak to those things, but I know some people who are, and they speak out a lot.
Well, see, that's my point when I was saying earlier about, okay, you're going to homeschool your kid, but now it puts a book, and the book said you got to know biology towards a science course, and you yourself just are not adapt towards this book.
Homeschooling means they learn in your home environment. Doesn't always mean that the parent is the teacher. There are ways for your kids to attend school from home.
Oh, you mean online?
Whether it's online, whether it's a set of curriculum that comes from an organization, there are all kinds of ways. And then there are those parents who are very, very educated, very, very bright.
Right.
All right. But that doesn't mean that the parent that isn't. Was a time when people of color couldn't go to school.
Yeah.
And they learned.
Yeah. But see, again,
their parents weren't graduates from, the most prestigious colleges with the degree and the understanding of nuclear biology. We're not talking about nuclear biology. We're talking about, can you read? Can you write?
Right.
Can you Do you have comprehension skills? Are you a critical thinker? Mathematics, history, world history, cultural history, ethnic history related to the ethnicity of the individuals. Physics,
right?
Geometry, mathematics. There are a lot of things you can learn at home.
Right.
Lots of things.
Okay.
You're not,
And then you still may have to be tested with the CMT scores.
I can't speak to that.
That's what I'm saying. You got to really know.
We need to get somebody in here who can answer those questions.
Right. Because, those things are still going to be valuable at some point, Well, how people feel about...
Those tests are just a means by which to assess. Does the student have mastery over that information that he has gathered from his school? That's an evaluation more, in my mind, it's an evaluation of the school's ability to teach the children. Because the children are the ultimate end game. Either they have mastered the information or they haven't.
Right.
If they haven't mastered the information, either something's wrong with the kid or something's wrong with the system of delivery. If you have lots of kids who are not mastering, then something's wrong with the system of delivery.
Right. But who usually, not so much even gets the blame, but who usually pays for it?
The kids.
Yeah, they're the ones that are really going to pay for it. So when you see this mastery test scores, 20%, Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury at the bottom, Avon,
that means
90%,
someone failed.
Right.
The children.
Right, but the children are going to pay for it more likely
Absolutely,
than the administration.
Children are going to pay for it. But if when people make catastrophic mistakes, who pays for it? Passengers on the plane.
I knew you was going to get to that at some point, y'all.
Yeah. Folk have to be held accountable for their failures.
Right.
A school is one place you can hold people accountable.
Right. And then what's allowing it to continue?
Right. I believe in giving people the resources they need to get the job done. If you got the resources, you signed off on the resources, you're an expert at delivery, and you can't teach my kids, we're going to have a problem.
The only thing I will say, Stan, and I don't know if you want to justify it because it was this way even before I was in the school system, this excuse, well, it takes about 10, 15 minutes just to get the kids to settle down. They come into your class, they're disruptive, they're making noise.
Right.
And it takes about another 5 to 10 minutes just to get them to quiet down and then start to be able to teach the kids.
Right now you got 15 minutes in the classroom. Now you're going to start the process all over again. During the pandemic, parents found out real quick most of the time in school was spent doing nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
Moving through the hallway, standing in line, moving to the lunchroom, to this room, to that room, back to this classroom, to this room. I was stunned. My wife and I.
Yes.
Come into because of course we had set up little places for them. What are you doing? Nothing. What do you mean nothing? It's 10:30. Well, we're done. Done? What do you mean done? How can you be done? It's 10:30.
Yeah.
All of the classes are done.
Right.
It took me a couple of hot minutes to figure this out. We went through all of this stuff, this, that, and the third. They broke it all down to me, and we're finished.
Right.
Then it come to realize they didn't have to line up. The class opened, they started. They went through the curriculum for the day. Went to the next one. Curriculum done. So the actual amount of learning that takes place is relatively quite short.
Short, yeah.
15, 20 minutes. Then they go to the next thing. And then there's the transition. So by the time you get up, go to school, get on the bus, go to the school, get off the bus, get inside, take the coat off, this, that, the third. It's a whole routine and a regimen. So more time is spent doing all of that than actually learning anything. So you could do that at home.
At home, yeah. Well, the thing is, while the students, and we still have students going through the public school system, you still can't lose sight of that. So the alternatives, yes, can be you can do it at home, but the majority is not going to be doing it at home. Now, the numbers, like Peter is indicating, is going up. There's no doubt about that, but that's still not a high percentage say, let's say 80 to 90% of most inner city students are going to be learning in a public school system.
I would say so.
If not even more than that. So although you can have alternatives with homeschooling, because you could pretty much forget about private schooling. If you're poor and don't have any money, I don't think you're going to find a way to get your kid into a private school. And you don't want to break the law sending the student to another school district where you don't live at.
Right. There's no greater criminal offense than trying to get an education for your kid by sending them out of the district.
Right. But then the parent now pays for that. They end up being arrested, and I think that happened one time.
Yeah, that happens quite a few times. You're stealing an education.
But I mean, if you want to justify it when you go to court, well, it's a desperate matter.
Open up, police.
Yeah.
Ed, police, get out.
Right.
Get on the floor. You're under arrest for stealing education for your child.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, again, I mean, I know you're running for mayor, and I know you got your pinpoint plans, and, you don't justify things not working when they can work. I mean, you're realistic, too. Now, some things are not going to work out. If a kid has a criminal gun bringing guns to school, you got to deal with that problem. Now, I'm not saying that's the high number, but you don't want to blame now the teacher for that problem. Now, the teacher didn't put a gun in.
It's the teacher's fault.
Right. So we got to be careful now when we always want to focus on the
I
school.
don't do blame.
But you want to get the thing, but you blame that things when they don't get resolved, though.
I identify the source of the issue or the problem, and then we fix it or get rid of it.
Okay.
I don't believe in blame. Blame is not a useful tool.
Mm-hmm.
You identify the source of the problem and fix it. It's not a blame is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's premeditated.
Right.
All right. But what do we have to do to get it fixed? Not who can we blame for it being broken. We spend more time blaming people than we do fixing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fixing things are going to be always a little bit more of a challenge.
It's not a challenge. Just do it. It's no more a challenge than coming back on the second day to UPS.
Yeah, you can do it now. I mean, you got the job, so I can't say
right,
that,
so let's get it done.
Now, if you don't want to...
What do we got to do to get it done?
Right. Well, again, I mean, I appreciate the time you gave me this morning for the interview and the show format as usual. Very good opportunity. And I love the conversations on both sides that we had. Mm-hmm. And let me relay this up to Peter now, what he thinks about this segment.
All right.
Any plans?
I've never met Peter. Hi, Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought about maybe having a three-way conversation one day.
Yeah, Peter should be a guest.
He's just not. Him and Flo are just not ready to tell their life story.
They're not telling a life story. Just come beam in about a subject like homeschooling.
Right. He's just very selective over the camera, though. I don't know what it is. He just don't like to have things over the camera. But probably off camera, he would love to talk, but not on.
A lot of people don't like being on camera. People can identify you really easily on camera.
Right. And see you now.
They can see you.
Exactly.
Right.
But I'll continue to try to talk him into it.
All right, Mr. Small, thank you, sir. Good job. Good job, as always.
You're welcome.
All right, my friends, we'll see you next time. You all have a great rest of your day. Do something wonderful for yourselves. There's a couple of forums coming up. I think there's a forum tomorrow. I want to say it's at the Lyceum. It's on homelessness and
housing.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah,
that's
tomorrow afternoon. Mm-hmm. There's another forum on Wednesday, I think. There will be several forums. I may not be in some of them, not because I don't want to come, but because I won't be invited. Because I'm not trying to get on the petition. I'm not petitioning my way onto the primary. I'm skipping the primary. So a lot of the forums are only for people whose names are going to be on the 12th, the September 12th ballot. My name's not going to be on the September 12th ballot. It's going to be on the November 7th ballot, which is the election for mayor. All right, that's the election for mayor. The September the 12th is not the election for mayor. It is the primary for the Democrats and Republicans, but the Republicans have no challengers, so there won't be a Republican primary. But there will be a primary for the Democrats, and the Democrats are going to pick, who they want to be, the party members. I'll vote on the 12th. I can't tell you who I'm going to vote for because it would be not right to endorse a candidate and then run against that candidate.
Right.
They send out mixed messages.
So you are going to vote on September for a candidate now. That's the key.
Oh yeah. Well, I got to vote for. I as a party member, I get to vote for who I think should be the best representative of them. I write my own name in.
But you're not running for the primary, though. So how?
No.
Okay.
Well, if I got to vote for someone, who do you think I'm gonna vote for?
Okay. Yeah.
Did I get that face right?
Yeah, it's gonna be a little challenge in your mentality when you step into that poll. You see these 3 candidates, or how many?
Yeah.
For the primary, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Overtime now.
All right, my friends, you all have a great rest of your day. We'll see you. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Okay.
Special thanks to our guest, Rick, the boxing expert. Now I'm going to talk to Sammy, Rick.